Imagine walking across the street to your neighbor's house just to ask them to stop yelling at your kids. A simple human moment. But instead of a conversation, you hear the sound of a gunshot. And in that instant, a mother of 4 falls to the ground, never to rise again. This is the chilling story of Ajike AJ Owens, a 35-year-old single mom whose life ended not at the hands of a stranger in a dark alley, but at the doorstep of her own neighbor. A case that exposed the raw wounds of America: race, fear, anger, and the infamous law known as Stand Your Ground. This is not just a crime story. It is the story of community, justice, and the haunting question, can a neighbor truly be a killer hiding in plain sight?
Ajike Owens, lovingly called AJ, was a mother of 4 young children living in Ocala, Florida. She was known in her community as a strong, caring, protective figure. Friends described her as someone who would give the shirt off her back for anyone. But above all, she was a mother first. Her children were her world. And like any parent, she wanted to give them the chance at a safe, happy childhood. What she could not have imagined, though, was that the greatest danger to their safety wasn't far away. It was waiting right next door.
Living next to AJ was Susan Lawrence, a 58-year-old white woman. From the outside, she looked like just another neighbor. Quiet, ordinary, nothing remarkable. But behind closed doors, things were very different. According to multiple reports, Lawrence often clashed with neighborhood children, yelling at them when they played outside. She allegedly used racial slurs, threw objects, and created an atmosphere of fear. For AJ and her children, what should have been the comfort of home became a source of constant tension. The divide between the 2 homes wasn't just about property lines. It was about culture, race, and the unspoken walls that sometimes split American neighborhoods in 2. On June 2nd, 2023, the tensions finally boiled over. That evening, AJ's children were playing in the yard when an argument broke out. According to the children, Lawrence shouted at them and even threw an object that struck one of the kids. Like any protective mother would, AJ walked across the street to confront her neighbor. She wasn't armed. She wasn't threatening. She simply wanted answers. Why was this woman targeting her kids? Why couldn't they just live in peace? But before she could even finish knocking, on the door, a single gunshot rang out. In that split second, AJ Owens was shot through the door by Susan Lawrence. The bullet struck AJ in the chest. She collapsed in front of her children, who watched in horror as their world shattered. Her kids screamed for help. Neighbors rushed out. AJ was taken to the hospital, but it was too late. She was pronounced dead that night. Her 4 children, 4 young souls, had just witnessed the unthinkable, the violent killing of their mother right before their eyes.
Police quickly identified the shooter as Susan Lawrence. She was arrested and charged with manslaughter with a firearm, along with several counts of assault. But almost immediately, controversy erupted. Lawrence claimed she had acted in self-defense, invoking Florida's controversial Stand Your Ground law, a law that allows individuals to use deadly force if they believe their life is in danger. But the question was Susan Lawrence truly afraid for her life? Or was this murder fueled by anger and prejudice? As news spread, outrage swept across Florida and the nation. Civil rights activists, community leaders, and even national media outlets demanded answers. How could a mother of four, unarmed and standing on a porch, be seen as a threat? Why did her life end because of a neighbor's paranoia? The case became a rallying point for conversations about race, justice, and the flaws of Stand Your Ground. And it would soon become the focus of one of Netflix's most talked about documentaries, The Perfect Neighbor.
After the shooting, detectives swarmed the neighborhood. They studied the porch, the bullet hole in the door, and gathered testimony from witnesses. What they quickly realized was chilling. Ajike Owens hadn't broken into the home. She hadn't attacked. She was standing outside, unarmed, with her children nearby. The bullet that killed her had been fired through a closed door. To investigators, this didn't look like self-defense. It looked like fear mixed with anger and a trigger pulled too fast. The most heartbreaking witnesses were AJ's own children. In tears, they told officers how Lawrence had yelled racial insults at them before, how she had thrown a roller skate at one of the kids that same evening, and how their mother went only to demand respect, not violence. One child told detectives, "Mom just wanted her to stop yelling at us. She wasn't going to hurt her." These testimonies painted a very different picture than the shooter's claims of self-defense. They painted a picture of harassment, hostility, and hatred. Detectives arrested Susan Lawrence and charged her with manslaughter with a firearm, culpable negligence, and assault. But Lawrence's lawyers immediately began to prepare her defense, and it would rest on Florida's most controversial legal shield, the Stand Your Ground law. Florida's Stand Your Ground law, passed in 2005, gives people the right to use deadly force if they believe their life is in immediate danger, with no duty to retreat. To supporters, it's about empowerment and protection. To critics, it's a license to kill, often used to justify shootings that target minorities. In this case, Lawrence claimed she believed AJ was breaking into her home, even though AJ never crossed the threshold. This raised a critical question. Where does self-defense end, and where does reckless violence begin? As soon as the charges were announced, protests erupted. Activists argued that if the races had been reversed, if a black woman had shot a white mother, the outcome would have been swift and harsh. But because of Stand Your Ground, there was fear that AJ's death might not lead to real accountability. National figures, civil rights groups, and even celebrities spoke out. The Owens family's tragedy became a national movement, demanding not just justice for AJ, but reform of laws that seemed to put lives in danger instead of protecting them. In court, the prosecution laid out a simple story. AJ was unarmed. She never entered the house. The shooter had a history of hostility towards her children. The defense countered, Lawrence was an older woman living alone. She claimed she feared for her life, believing AJ might break in. Stand Your Ground gave her the legal right to defend herself. The jury listened, the families wept, and the question hung in the air. Whose version of fear mattered more? In 2025, Netflix released a powerful documentary titled The Perfect Neighbor. The series explored not just the killing of Ajike Owens, but the deeper racial divides in America, the broken trust between neighbors, and the dangerous gray area created by stand-your-ground laws. The documentary reignited debate nationwide. Suddenly, AJ's story was back on front pages, forcing millions to ask, how safe are we if fear alone can justify pulling the trigger? For AJ's children, no law or documentary could bring their mother back, but her family vowed to fight on. They became voices for justice, standing before microphones, reminding the world that this case wasn't about politics or law alone. It was about 4 kids who had their mother stolen from them. Her mother, Pamela Diaz, spoke with trembling voice. "My daughter was murdered in cold blood. I will not stop fighting until justice is served."
The courtroom was heavy with silence as weeks of testimony came to an end. The jury had listened to neighbors, to police, to AJ's grieving children. They had heard about racial slurs, about years of tension, about a mother who came to a doorstep only to lose her life. For the prosecution, this was not self-defense. It was an unjustified killing fueled by anger. For the defense, this was fear. The fear of an older woman who believed she was protecting herself. In that moment, the jury carried more than just a verdict. They carried the weight of a national debate. Can fear alone be an excuse for pulling the trigger? When the verdict was finally read, the courtroom held its breath. Susan Lawrence was found guilty of manslaughter with a firearm and culpable negligence. The jury rejected her stand-your-ground defense, agreeing with prosecutors that AJ Owens had posed no threat. The judge sentenced Lawrence to decades in prison, ensuring she would never again walk the neighborhood streets she once terrorized. For AJ's family, it was not full healing, but it was justice. The verdict sparked a national conversation. Television networks, podcasts, and social media exploded with debate. Supporters of AJ's family called the decision a victory, proof that stand your ground had limits, that a mother's life could not be erased under the excuse of fear. But critics warned that the law itself remained dangerous, still available for others to misuse in future cases. In cities across the U.S., people marched with signs that read, "Justice for AJ is justice for us all." In the months after the trial, communities gathered to remember Ajike AJ Owens. Vigils were held not just in Florida, but across the nation. Her children were embraced by supporters, strangers who promised to stand by them. Scholarships were set up in AJ's name. Her story became a symbol of courage, of the need to speak up, and of the dangers ordinary people face when laws are twisted. Her mother said softly at one vigil, "AJ died protecting her children. Let her death protect countless others."
When Netflix's documentary, The Perfect Neighbor, aired in 2025, it reignited interest in the case. Viewers across the world saw the story not as a distant headline, but as a human tragedy. They watched AJ's children tell their story. They heard her family's pain. They confronted uncomfortable questions about race, bias, and the fragility of safety, even in your own home. The documentary became one of the year's most watched crime series, proof that AJ's story had shaken people far beyond Florida. Today, the name Ajike AJ Owens stands as more than just a case file. It's a reminder of a mother's love, of a community's fight, and of a nation still wrestling with its laws and its conscience. Her death sparked change. Her story forced millions to ask, what does it mean to feel safe? And who truly has the right to claim fear? In the end, AJ's legacy is not just about tragedy. It is about transformation. About children who will grow up knowing their mother's story became part of a movement that demands a world where neighbors don't kill neighbors, but protect one another.
This was the story of Ajike Owens, a story of justice delayed but not denied, a story of laws, of race, of fear, and of love, and perhaps a story that reminds us that behind every headline is a family, a community, and a future forever changed.